Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know where you are from. Also, what time is it? The storm had come out of nowhere. It started as a mere drizzle, a faint whisper of rain tapping lightly against the windshield. No one thought it was anything more than the typical evening weather. A little wet, a little cold. But by the time the sun had dipped below the horizon, the entire world had turned into a slushy nightmare. Snow began to fall, heavy and fast, transforming the roads into icy tracks, each layer more treacherous than the last. Anna glanced at the clock. 11:45 p.m. She had been driving for hours, a late night trip to visit her sister in the city. The roads, once familiar and well lit, had become unrecognizable. The snow swirled thick in the air, driven by the fierce wind that seemed to be pushing against her car, urging her to stop. But she couldn't stop. Not now. Not when she was so close. She didn't know why she didn't stop earlier. Maybe it was the excitement of seeing her sister after months apart. Maybe it was the urgency she felt to reach her. Or perhaps it was the strange sense of calm that had overtaken her during the drive. The road was empty, her headlights cutting through the fog like a beacon in the distance. Yet there was something unnerving about the silence, as if the world had been swallowed up by the storm. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel, her knuckles growing pale. The radio was playing softly in the background, the announcer's voice garbled and crackling through the static. A news report about the worsening weather. But Anna wasn't listening. Her eyes were glued to the road, where the white blur of snow was beginning to obscure her vision. A flash of light from the corner of her eye caught her attention. A car. No. A truck was barreling down the road toward her. The headlights were too bright, blinding her momentarily. She squinted, swerving slightly to the right to avoid the approaching vehicle. But as it passed, something in the shadows caught her attention. A figure, a silhouette standing just outside the reach of the headlights. She froze. The figure was standing there, motionless, in the middle of the storm, its outline barely visible, but there. A person. Or at least, it looked like one. Anna's heart raced, and she slammed her foot on the gas, speeding away from the sight. It could have been anyone, just a traveler stranded in the storm, or worse, a hitchhiker. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Minutes passed. Or was it hours? The road stretched on endlessly, each bend and curve blending into the next. The storm raged with increasing fury, the snow falling in thick sheets that made it impossible to see anything more than a few feet ahead. The windshield wipers were struggling to keep up, streaking across the glass in an erratic, frantic pattern. And then, just when Anna thought the worst was over, the car lurched. A sudden, violent jolt shook the entire vehicle, sending her hands flying off the wheel. Her heart skipped a beat as she slammed her foot onto the brake, pulling the car to a sudden halt. She sat there, frozen in the eerie quiet of the storm. What the hell was that? Her hands trembled as she reached for the door handle, her breath shallow and erratic. For a moment, she considered just driving away. Whatever had caused the jolt couldn't be worth investigating. But then, as if drawn by some invisible force, she opened the door and stepped out into the frigid night. The snow hit her face with a sharp sting, and she shivered, pulling her coat tighter around her body. The wind howled, almost deafening in its intensity. She peered around, scanning the darkness. There was nothing but the endless white of the snowstorm, the ground beneath her feet disappearing into the mist. No signs of what had caused the jolt. No sign of any other vehicles. No sign of life, just the storm. Anna took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. It had to be an animal, she thought. Maybe a deer. That would make sense. There were plenty of them out here in the wilderness. But as she bent down to inspect the tire tracks, her stomach sank. The tracks were deep, too deep. and they weren't the smooth, uniform tracks left by a car. They were jagged, twisted, and they led off into the forest, disappearing into the white mist. She stood there, staring at the tracks, feeling an uneasy chill crawl up her spine. Something wasn't right, and yet there was no turning back now. With a deep breath, she climbed back into the car and slammed the door shut. Her hands shook as she turned the key in the ignition, the engine sputtering to life with a loud roar. She put the car into gear, her eyes darting between the road and the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something, or someone, following her. But there was nothing. She didn't realize how hard she had been gripping the wheel until her fingers ached from the tension. The snowstorm was getting worse, the visibility near zero. The road twisted in unnatural ways, curling into the darkness like a serpent waiting to strike. But there was no turning back. The nearest town was still miles away, and her sister's house, where she was supposed to be, was on the other side of the storm. Anna's thoughts were interrupted by a strange noise, a soft tapping on the roof of her car. She froze, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror again. The reflection was clear, revealing nothing behind her. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something wasn't right in this storm. She pulled over to the side of the road, her heart pounding in her chest. The snow had begun to fall even heavier, and the wind had intensified. She could barely see the edge of the road, let alone what lay ahead. She rolled down her window, straining to hear anything beyond the storm. The sound of the tapping continued, growing louder, more rhythmic, as if someone, or something, was knocking on the roof. Her blood ran cold as she stared out into the thick wall of white. She couldn't make out a thing. Another tap, this time louder. Anna's pulse raced. She knew she should just drive away. She knew she should just get out of there, but her body refused to obey. Instead, her eyes drifted upward to the rearview mirror again, and her stomach dropped as she saw it. A figure. A dark, hunched figure stood behind her car, its face hidden by the swirling snow. It was too tall, too still, and too close. Her breath caught in her throat as she reached for the door handle, but before she could open it, the figure vanished into the storm. The tapping stopped. Silence. For what felt like an eternity, Anna sat there, her hands shaking violently on the steering wheel. The figure had been standing there, right behind her car, not moving. She had seen it. She had felt it. But it was gone now. Her thoughts were a jumbled mess. Should she stay and wait for help? Should she keep driving? She glanced at the headlights again. The road was still empty. There was no sign of the figure. But then, out of nowhere, the radio crackled to life. The same announcer from earlier, his voice tense and urgent. Reports of strange occurrences along Route 57. Several drivers have reported seeing figures in the storm. Do not stop. Continue driving. We repeat, do not stop. Continue driving until you reach a safe location. Anna's blood ran cold. She had just been on Route 57. She had stopped on Route 57. Panic surged through her chest as her grip tightened on the steering wheel. She couldn't explain it. Couldn't explain the figure. Couldn't explain the strange tapping. But there was one thing she knew for sure. She had just made the worst decision of her life. And she wasn't alone on that road. Not anymore. The wind was howling now, a savage roar that seemed to drown out every other sound. Anna's car felt like it was being shaken, tossed about by some unseen force. Her breath was shallow, her heart hammering in her chest. The radio's voice echoed in her ears, a distorted warning that only made her feel more isolated. Figures in the storm. Strange lights. Stay inside your vehicle. Anna's hands were slick with sweat as she gripped the wheel, her knuckles white against the leather. Her eyes darted to the rearview mirror again. Though she knew it was useless, she couldn't see anything in the thick wall of snow that had descended upon the road. The headlights barely cut through the storm now. and the snow was falling faster than ever before. She had to focus on the road, had to stay calm. But it was hard. Harder than anything she'd ever done in her life. The storm wasn't just snow and rain now. It was a wall of darkness pushing against her. The eerie calm from before was gone. She felt watched. She felt hunted. There had been something out there in the storm. A figure. A presence. She wasn't imagining it. It was real. Her pulse quickened at the thought of the figure behind her car. She had seen it clearly in the rearview mirror. It had been tall, impossibly tall, its form swallowed by the swirling snow. It had been standing there, right behind her vehicle, like a shadow looming in the darkness. The tapping on the roof hadn't been an animal. She was certain of it now. The figure had been there. Had it been trying to get her attention? Had it been trying to warn her? Anna shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away. No, she needed to focus. She needed to keep driving. She couldn't afford to stop. Not again. Not with this storm closing in. But as she continued down the road, her gaze remained fixed on the rearview mirror. The sensation of being watched was suffocating. And no matter how hard she tried to focus on the road ahead, her mind kept returning to the figure. The radio crackled again, breaking through her thoughts. The announcer's voice was even more urgent now, panic creeping into his tone. Multiple reports of cars stopped on Route 57. Authorities are advising all drivers to keep moving. Do not stop. Do not leave your vehicle. Anna's stomach dropped. She had stopped. She had stopped, and now she was part of the very thing the announcer was warning about. She gripped the wheel harder, her knuckles aching from the pressure. Her breath quickened. Her chest tightened. There was no way she could go back now. No way to erase what she had done. The only thing she could do was move forward. She pressed down on the accelerator, trying to push the fear down. The tires of her car churned through the snow, their tracks leaving a trail behind her. Each turn of the wheel felt heavier, as if the road itself was fighting her. But she couldn't afford to stop. Not again. She drove faster now. Though she knew it was dangerous. The road was slippery, the visibility nearly zero. She squinted through the snow, trying to make out any signs of life. But there was nothing. The world had become a blur of white and black. The storm seemed to be growing more intense, and her grip on the wheel loosened as the cold crept in. Her car was shaking, the wind howling so loudly that it drowned out everything else. She couldn't hear anything outside of the roar of the storm and the pounding of her own heart. And then, through the mist of falling snow, she saw something. A flicker of light, a faint glow just up ahead. It was barely visible, a small, dim light in the distance. But it was enough, a sign. Anna's heart leaped as she focused on it, her eyes narrowing against the glare of the headlights. There, in the distance, was a road sign. The blinking light of a street lamp illuminated it briefly before it was swallowed again by the storm. It was a welcome sight. Or so it should have been. Her pulse quickened as she drew closer, but something was wrong. The closer she got, the more the sign seemed off. As if the light was flickering unnaturally, she squinted, her brow furrowing. The sign read Route 57N. That couldn't be right. She had been driving on Route 57, but she hadn't seen a sign for its end. The road should have continued. She slammed on the brakes, the car screeching as it slid on the icy road. Her heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She jerked the wheel to the left, trying to regain control, but the car slid again, spinning around in the thick snow. For a split second, everything felt suspended in time. The car swirled around in the storm, the headlights cutting through the chaos like a beacon of terror. Anna screamed, her hands shaking uncontrollably as she tried to steer, but the storm was too strong. It was like the road was alive, pulling her into its grip. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the car stopped. It was like hitting a wall. Anna sat there for a moment, her hands still gripping the wheel, her breath shallow and ragged. She didn't know what had happened. 1 second, she had been spinning, and the next, everything was still. Silent. She turned the key in the ignition, praying that the car would start again, but it wouldn't. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she sat in the frozen silence, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. The snow was still falling in sheets, the world around her a frozen wasteland. The faint glow of the sign was barely visible now, just a weak flicker in the distance. But as she stared at it, something shifted. The light from the sign wasn't the only thing moving. The shadows were shifting too. She watched, her eyes wide with fear, as the shadows on the road seemed to twist and contort, taking on strange shapes. For a moment, she thought she saw something moving, something large and dark, just beyond the sign. It was hard to tell. The way the snow blurred everything, but there was something there, something waiting. A sudden knock on the window made her jump, her heart leaping in her chest. She froze, her blood running cold. The figure. It had to be the same figure. It was here. Her eyes flicked to the side, and she saw nothing. The tapping on the window came again, louder this time. The glass rattled with each strike. Anna's breath caught in her throat, her skin crawling. The figure was out there. She was sure of it. The tapping stopped, and then, slowly, almost too slowly, Anna turned her head to look at the passenger seat. A figure was sitting there, its face pale and twisted, staring at her through the glass. Her scream died in her throat as she stared at the figure. Its cold, dead eyes locked on hers. It was no longer outside her car. It was in the seat next to her. The storm raged on outside, but inside the car, the cold was unbearable, and Anna wasn't alone anymore. The figure leaned in closer, its breath fogging the glass. The tapping had never stopped. It had only moved to the inside of the car. Anna's blood ran cold, her fingers numb as they gripped the steering wheel. Her eyes refused to leave the figure sitting beside her, too still, too quiet. It was as if time itself had frozen, and she was trapped in this single moment, the one that should never have existed. Her breath caught in her throat, and her chest felt like it was constricting. The figure. No. The thing was not human. It was something else, something dark, something that shouldn't be there. Its skin was unnaturally pale, stretched tight over a hollow face, and its eyes were the worst part. Empty, black as night. Not a single spark of life or humanity in them, just endless, fathomless darkness. She couldn't look away. It felt like the very air in the car had turned thick and suffocating. Every breath was a struggle, and the weight of its presence was pressing down on her, heavier than the storm outside. The tapping on the window had stopped, but the silence inside the car was deafening. The figure didn't move. Its face was pressed close to the glass, its eyes staring into hers with a chilling intensity that made her skin crawl. It was as if it was waiting for something, watching her, studying her every movement, every breath. Her heart was racing. She wanted to scream, to push the door open and run, but she couldn't move. Her body refused to obey. She was trapped. The storm outside was relentless. The snow now coming down in thick, heavy sheets, swirling violently around the car, as if the world itself was trying to tear her apart. But the world outside no longer mattered. Nothing mattered but the figure sitting beside her. She swallowed, trying to force her body to move, to do anything other than stare at the figure. But the longer she looked, the more she felt herself slipping into its gaze. It was hypnotic, its eyes, the way they seemed to pull her in, drowning her in their darkness. She didn't know how long she had been sitting there, unable to move, unable to speak. It could have been seconds, minutes, or hours. Time had no meaning here. Then, without warning, the figure leaned forward, slowly, deliberately. The air in the car grew colder, the temperature dropping so suddenly that Anna could see her breath fogging in front of her face. Her heart thudded in her chest as the figure came closer, its pale face almost touching hers. Its breath was cold, frigid, like the very essence of winter had entered the car. Anna's blood ran colder, still as she realized that its eyes had not shifted away. It wasn't just staring at her. It was inside her mind, rifling through her thoughts, her fears, her deepest, darkest memories. Her body trembled, but she still couldn't move. And then the thing smiled. It wasn't a smile that came from a human being, no. It was something twisted, something unnatural. Its lips cracked open, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too jagged, too many to be real. The grin stretched wider and wider, as if the face itself was trying to split apart. And through the grin, the thing spoke. "You shouldn't have stopped." It whispered, its voice a rasping, jagged sound. It echoed in her mind, reverberating like a warning that she couldn't escape. "You shouldn't have come this way." Anna's throat went dry, her pulse hammering in her ears. The thing's voice was like nails on a chalkboard, scratching at her soul. She couldn't understand why, but she felt the words dig into her, like they were unearthing something deep inside her, something buried she didn't want to remember. Who are you?" she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible over the sound of the storm. But the figure didn't answer. Instead, it leaned in even closer, its breath now frosty against her skin. The car shook suddenly, rocking with an eerie intensity. Anna's body jerked as the snowstorm outside battered against the vehicle, and the figure's form seemed to ripple in response to the chaos. The air inside the car felt heavy, like the pressure was building, and the whole world was about to explode. Then, the figure's grin faded, replaced by something even more horrifying. Its eyes, those deep, black pits, narrowed, and Anna felt a cold, seeping dread course through her body. It was looking at her like it knew everything about her, like it was looking deep into her soul. "You don't belong here," it whispered, its voice low and menacing. "You never did." Suddenly, the car jerked again, and Anna's heart lurched. She grabbed the wheel, trying to regain control, but it was impossible. The snow was too thick, the storm too fierce. The vehicle slid once more, spinning wildly out of control as the wind howled louder than ever. She struggled to stay calm, her hands shaking as she fought the wheel. But it was like the storm itself had turned against her, pushing her in every direction but the right one. The figure didn't move. It stayed beside her, its eyes locked on hers, its face twisted in that grotesque, hollow smile. The storm outside raged on, the blizzard intensifying with each passing second. She could barely see anything ahead of her now. The road was gone. The world around her had disappeared into the blinding snow. All she could focus on was the figure beside her and the sheer sense of wrongness that had taken over the car. "Where are you going?" it asked, its voice dripping with malice. "There's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide." Anna's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to scream, wanted to ask what it wanted, what was happening to her. But the words didn't come. The figure's presence was overwhelming, its gaze suffocating. It was like the very essence of the storm had settled in beside her, in the passenger seat, waiting for something. She tried to scream, but her voice faltered. The storm outside deafened her, drowning out everything else. She couldn't tell if it was the wind or the thing beside her that made the sound of whispering grow louder in her ears. A new voice. This one distant, faint, whispered through the chaos, cutting through the howling wind. "Anna, you need to drive. You need to drive now." She looked up, confused, her eyes desperately searching for the source of the voice. It wasn't the figure. It was someone else. Someone familiar. Her sister. No, it couldn't be. But it sounded like her. The voice grew louder, more frantic. "Drive, Anna! The storm will take you! You have to get out of here! Drive now!" With a start, Anna looked back at the road, squinting against the blinding snow. In that split second, The figure beside her vanished, and suddenly, the car began to lurch forward. Anna gasped as the car lurched forward, the sudden motion throwing her body against the seat. The ice, cold air stung her face, and her heart pounded in her chest as the reality of the situation hit her like a punch to the gut. The figure beside her was gone, but the lingering sense of dread remained, like an invisible force that had taken root in the car. Her hands shook violently on the wheel, but she kept them there, gripping it with all the strength she could muster. The storm had intensified, the snow falling thicker now, faster, as if the very heavens were determined to swallow her whole. The wind howled outside, and the car seemed to shudder with every gust, as though it too was terrified of what lay ahead. But the road was clear. For a fleeting moment, Anna dared to hope. The storm had subsided, the visibility was better, and the road stretched ahead of her, long and winding but passable. She glanced at the rearview mirror. There was no sign of the figure, no movement in the storm behind her. She told herself to calm down. She was being paranoid. The figure was gone. It had to be. It was a trick of the storm, a hallucination brought on by the terror and the isolation. It didn't make sense for a person to be out here, let alone in her car. But then, something caught her eye. A shape, small and indistinct, barely visible through the falling snow. It was ahead of her on the road, just off to the side, standing like a shadow in the white blur. Anna's pulse spiked again, her grip tightening on the wheel. She couldn't make out any details, just the silhouette of something standing, unmoving, in the middle of the road. Her heart hammered as she slowed down, her foot hovering over the brake. Was it the same figure? The one she had seen earlier? Was it real? Or had the storm somehow driven her mad? She leaned forward, trying to get a better look, but the snow was falling too quickly, blurring everything in its path. The figure, if it was even a person, was too far away. She couldn't make out a face, or even a shape. But it was there, right there on the road, just beyond the headlights. Something was wrong. Something didn't feel right. Her breath hitched in her throat. Her instinct screamed at her to stop, to turn around and get away. But she couldn't. There was no place to turn. No other road. The path was clear. The only way was forward. She pressed the accelerator, forcing herself to keep moving, to push through the fear that gripped her. The figure was still there in the distance, barely a shape against the white of the storm. She couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching her, that it knew she was coming. And just as she thought she would pass it, the figure moved. It didn't run. It didn't lunge. It just shifted, like it was stepping out of the shadows. For a moment, everything seemed to stop, the snow hanging frozen in the air. The figure raised its hand, slowly, deliberately, and Anna froze. The hand didn't look human. It was long, thin, and unnatural. Too thin, too long to belong to a person. The fingers stretched unnaturally, reaching out toward her like claws. She could see it now, the way it reached for her with a terrifying slowness. The sight was enough to make her heart stop in her chest. Don't stop. The voice echoed in her mind again, louder this time. Don't stop.
Drive.
But she couldn't move. The fear gripped her, an icy vice that squeezed the breath from her lungs. She was paralyzed. She was locked in place, staring at that outstretched hand, frozen in terror. The hand slowly lowered, and just as Anna thought she could breathe again, it turned. The figure was walking toward her, slowly, methodically, and with each step, the storm around her seemed to grow louder, the wind howling, the snow falling in thick curtains, blurring everything. The road ahead was vanishing, the edges of the world dissolving into the blizzard. Anna's foot was still hovering over the brake, but she could not bring herself to press it. She couldn't stop. She couldn't go forward. She couldn't move at all. The figure was walking toward her now, its pace steady and relentless. Every step it took felt like an eternity. its shadow growing larger and darker as it approached. She tried to look away. She tried to focus on the road, to clear her mind, but the figure was all she could see. Its presence had filled the car, seeped into her thoughts, wrapped around her very soul. She couldn't escape it. The figure stopped, mere feet from her car. The hand, now curled into a twisted, bony fist, reached toward her. Her pulse thundered in her ears, and then, without warning, it spoke. "You're not meant to be here." The voice was soft, barely more than a whisper, but it echoed inside her head as if the words were inside her very bones. The tone was chilling, colder than the storm outside, and it sent a wave of terror crashing through her. Anna's breath caught in her throat. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. It felt like the car was suffocating her, like the world around her had closed in, leaving her trapped with this thing. And then the figure took another step forward. But this time, the world responded. The snow intensified, the wind howled louder, and the car trembled violently beneath her. The figure lurched toward the vehicle, its legs bending in unnatural angles, its arms reaching out for her, its fingers scraping against the glass. Anna screamed. Finally, she screamed. But the sound was drowned by the roar of the storm. The figure's face now pressed against the window, its eyes black and endless, its mouth open in a silent, gaping scream. She slammed her foot onto the gas. The car lurched forward with a deafening roar, skidding out of control, sliding on the icy road, the tires screeching against the frozen ground. The headlights illuminated the figure for one last, horrifying moment, its twisted body contorted in a grotesque, nightmarish pose, its hands still reaching for her as the car tore away. Anna gritted her teeth, her eyes wide with panic, her heart racing as she forced the car to keep moving. She didn't care where she was going anymore. She just needed to get away from that thing. From whatever it was that had been following her, tormenting her in the storm. She didn't look back. She couldn't, but the figure wasn't gone. Not completely. The darkness in the storm had become something else. A shape. A shadow that moved with her. And the voice was still there. Whispering in the back of her mind, pulling at her thoughts. "You're not meant to be here." The car swerved again, and Anna slammed her foot onto the brake. Her body jolting as the tires skidded on the icy road. Her heart pounded in her chest, the sound of it deafening in her ears as she fought to keep control of the vehicle. The snow outside had turned into a relentless, blinding wall of white, and the road ahead had all but disappeared. She couldn't see anything. Not clearly. The storm had swallowed everything, and the world around her had become a dark, swirling vortex of snow and ice. Her hands were gripped tightly on the wheel, her knuckles aching, but she couldn't seem to focus. Her mind was racing, replaying the terrifying moments that had just passed. The figure, the twisted hand, the voice. "You're not meant to be here." The words echoed in her mind, reverberating like a warning. A chilling reminder of the terror she had just experienced. She glanced at the rearview mirror. Nothing. There was no sign of the figure. No movement. But that didn't make her feel better. She could still feel its presence, like a shadow that had attached itself to her, trailing behind her no matter how fast she drove. The storm outside was suffocating, and the darkness of the road stretched endlessly before her. She should have pulled over, she thought. Stopped somewhere, anywhere, to gather her thoughts. But there was no safe place. Not here, not now. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that the road itself felt wrong. It wasn't just the storm, it was something deeper, something inescapable. The road wasn't leading her to safety, it was leading her into the unknown. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she tried to push the fear down. She had to focus. She couldn't afford to lose control now. And then, just when she thought she could calm her racing heart, the car jerked. A violent jolt, as if it had hit something. Anna gasped, her eyes widening in panic. She slammed her foot onto the brake, the car sliding further down the road. Her grip tightened on the wheel, her heart racing again. Her gaze darted around, looking for any sign of what had caused the jolt. Had she hit an animal? A tree? But there was nothing, just the endless white of the storm. The visibility was so bad that she couldn't see more than a few feet ahead of her. Another jolt, this time harder. Her breath hitched as she tried to steady herself. Her mind was racing. What was happening to her? Was it the storm? Or was it something else? She glanced to the side, her eyes scanning the thick snow. She couldn't help it. She had to look. And that's when she saw it. A figure. A shadow. A shape standing just off the side of the road, barely visible in the swirling snow. It was tall, impossibly tall, like the thing she had seen before. She could just make out the faint outline of its head and shoulders. The rest of its body was swallowed by the storm. The world around her went completely still. Her breath caught in her throat. Not again. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, motionless. Its face obscured by the thick curtain of snow. But she could feel its gaze. It was as if the storm itself had turned its attention on her. Anna's heart began to race again. She wanted to look away. She wanted to close her eyes and pretend it wasn't there. But she couldn't. Something was drawing her to it. An invisible force, tugging at her, pulling her toward the figure. She could feel it, like a cold hand reaching inside her chest. The snowstorm had grown so thick that she couldn't see the road anymore. All that was left was the figure in the distance, standing there just waiting. The wind howled like a scream, and for a moment, everything else in the world faded away. The figure was the only thing that mattered now. Her hands shook violently as she reached for the door handle, her mind telling her to drive away, to get out of there. But her body wouldn't obey. The figure raised its arm, slowly, deliberately. It wasn't moving like a person. It was unnatural, jerky, like it wasn't fully alive. The hand stretched toward her. The fingers, too long, too thin, reached out into the storm. Anna slammed her foot onto the gas, the car lurching forward with a roar. But as she sped down the road, the figure didn't disappear. It was still there, walking now, keeping pace with the car. Its movement was slow, calculated, like it was in no hurry. And it was coming closer. Her stomach churned as she glanced at the side mirror. The figure wasn't just walking beside her. It was right there, just behind the car, its shape flickering in and out of view with the snow, but always there, always following. Her breath came faster now. She had to get away. She had to escape. The figure was getting closer, its shape coming into sharper focus as the storm began to calm, its outline becoming clearer, its eyes glinting in the headlights. The headlights. Anna's heart skipped a beat. The headlights were flickering. It wasn't the storm. It wasn't the storm. It wasn't just the snow. The headlights were flickering because something was wrong with the car. The figure was still there, moving closer, its silhouette now towering over the car. Its long, gaunt body seemed to stretch unnaturally as it leaned toward the window. Anna's eyes darted to the dashboard. The lights on the console were dimming. The engine was sputtering, choking on the effort to keep going. It was happening again. She slammed her foot on the brake, the tires screeching as the car skidded to a halt. The world around her seemed to stop. The figure, too, stopped, standing just inches from the window. Its face was now clear in the headlights, and Anna's breath caught in her throat. Its eyes were wide open, black and empty, devoid of life. Its mouth was stretched in a grotesque, inhuman grin. And then it spoke. You can't outrun it. Anna's blood ran cold. She froze, her fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly that they hurt. The words echoed in her mind, repeating over and over. You can't outrun it. The figure tilted its head, almost as if it were amused by her terror. It took another step forward, its cold breath fogging up the glass of the window. Anna's pulse raced, her thoughts spinning. She knew she had to drive. She knew she had to get away. But she couldn't. The car was failing. The storm was still raging outside, and the figure, it was right there. The world outside seemed to close in on her. The wind howled again, the snow swirling, cutting through the air like daggers. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching her, waiting. Anna swallowed hard, the words it had spoken replaying in her mind. You can't outrun it. She glanced at the rearview mirror. The road behind her was gone. The storm had erased all trace of the road. The way forward was just as empty. She had no choice. There was nowhere left to run. Anna's chest tightened with a mixture of fear and helplessness. The figure outside her window was still standing there, not moving, its hollow eyes boring into her. Its grin, distorted and wide, was something that didn't belong in this world. It wasn't human. It wasn't real. And yet, there it was, as if the storm itself had conjured it out of nothingness. You can't outrun it, it whispered again, its voice a low rasp that sent a chill crawling up Anna's spine. The storm will find you. It always does. The words echoed in her mind, becoming louder with each passing second. The world around her, the storm, the car. The road felt like it was collapsing into one singularity of cold, a suffocating, eternal cold that threatened to swallow her whole. The figure's presence was all-encompassing, and no matter how hard she tried to look away, her eyes kept drifting back to it, transfixed by the emptiness in its gaze. Her hands were still trembling, her fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly it hurt. The car's engine was sputtering, and the dashboard lights flickered weakly, as if it too were exhausted, giving up in the face of the relentless storm. Anna pressed the gas pedal again, her foot shaking as it connected with the metal. The car lurched forward, the tires skidding on the icy road, and for a moment she thought she had escaped the figure. But as she looked ahead, the road wasn't what she expected. The road stretched on and on, longer than it should have been, as if it had no end. The snow, now falling in thick curtains, obscured the edges of the road, making it impossible to discern any boundaries. The headlights of the car cut through the white blur, but everything beyond that was a dark, endless void. It was as though she was trapped in a loop, a never-ending road that stretched into the distance, mocking her with its emptiness. Her heart pounded in her chest. No, she whispered under her breath. No, no, no. She pressed the accelerator harder, the car roaring as it sped up, but the road never seemed to change. There was no curve, no intersection, just the same endless white. The more she drove, the more she realized that no matter how far she went, there would always be the road. The storm, the figure. Her mind raced, desperate to make sense of what was happening. Was she hallucinating? Was she stuck in some kind of nightmare? The words of the figure echoed in her head, growing louder with each passing second. You can't outrun it. The storm will find you. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise. Soft, almost imperceptible at first, but it grew louder until it became unmistakable. A tapping sound. Anna's heart skipped a beat. She turned her head, her eyes locking onto the side mirror. She could see the figure again, trailing behind her. It was running, its long, twisted limbs moved in unnatural ways, jerking as it sprinted toward her, its grin never faltering. It didn't even seem to be breathing. It didn't need to. It was coming for her. The tapping grew louder and faster, now coming from the passenger side window. Anna's eyes snapped to the side, and she saw the figure there too, its face pressed against the glass, staring at her with those lifeless, black eyes. Its twisted hand reached for the window, its fingers scraping against the glass with a sickening sound. Anna's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't scream. She couldn't think. All she could do was watch as the figure's fingers tapped against the window in a slow, deliberate rhythm, each tap sending a jolt of terror through her body. It wasn't just tapping anymore. It was scratching, clawing, as if trying to tear through the glass to reach her. Her hands were shaking as she desperately swerved the wheel, trying to push the car faster. But the storm only seemed to grow worse. The snow piled up on the sides of the road, thick and deep, and the wind howled like a living thing, pressing against the car with relentless force. The windshield wipers fought to keep up, but the snow was too much, blurring her vision. The figure was still there, in the side mirror, keeping pace with her, its twisted limbs moving faster now. And then, just when she thought she couldn't take any more, it was at the front of the car, standing right in the headlights. Anna slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt as she stared into the figure's face. It was so close now, close enough that she could see every detail of its hideous, featureless face. Its mouth was still stretched into that wide, mocking grin. Its black eyes never blinked. "You can't outrun it," it whispered again, its voice low and mocking. Anna's heart raced, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The car was shaking under her, and she could feel the cold seeping in through the windows, through her skin, through her very bones. She had to do something. She had to escape. The figure reached out a long, twisted arm, its fingers grazing the windshield. The glass cracked under the pressure, the tiny fractures spreading like spider webs. "No," Anna gasped, panic flooding her veins. "Please, no." She slammed her foot on the gas pedal, the car lurching forward with a jolt. The tires spun on the slick road, but the figure was still there, too close now, too close to escape. No matter how fast she drove, it was keeping up with her, walking with an eerie calmness, its body bending unnaturally as it followed the car. Her thoughts were spinning. Her head was spinning. What was she supposed to do? How could she escape something that could follow her no matter how fast she drove? What was the storm? What was the figure? And then, as if answering her question, a new voice broke through her thoughts. It was distant at first, faint, but as she listened, it grew louder. "Anna." Her breath caught in her throat. She knew that voice. "Anna, it's not too late." She turned her head, scanning the darkness of the storm, but she couldn't see anything. The voice sounded familiar, but it was distant, distorted, as though coming from far away. Was it someone trying to help her? "Please, help me!" Anna screamed into the storm, her voice cracking. "Please." "Anna." The voice was louder now, clearer. It was coming from inside the car, from somewhere close. She spun in the seat, her heart pounding in her chest. There, in the passenger seat, was a face she knew. Her sister. Anna's breath caught in her throat. Kara. But her sister's face was pale. Her eyes were wide with terror, and her lips were stretched into that same twisted grin as the figure outside. "Anna, you can't escape it," her sister whispered, her voice not her own. "You're already part of it." And then, just like that, her sister's face shifted, transforming into the same black-eyed, twisted grin as the figure outside the car. Anna screamed, but there was no escape. The storm had claimed her, and the road would never end. The sound of Anna's scream echoed in her ears, but it wasn't the only sound. There was a deep, unsettling rumble beneath the car, like something alive was stirring in the dark, pushing against the metal frame. The road was no longer just a road. It was something else. Something oppressive and cold, wrapping around her like a noose. Her sister's face, twisted into that sickening grin, was still there beside her, its eyes black as pitch. The storm outside raged, but the inside of the car had become eerily silent, as if the world had paused just for her. Anna's pulse thundered in her ears, and her vision blurred with the tears that streamed down her face. What is happening?" She gasped, her hands shaking as she reached for the steering wheel, trying to focus on anything but the thing next to her. Kara's face was wrong, so wrong. The twisted grin, the hollow eyes, just like the figure outside. It was her sister, but it wasn't. You're already part of it. The voice whispered again, colder than ice, dripping with malice. There's no going back. Anna's mind was a whirlpool of confusion and terror. She turned back to the road, her eyes desperately scanning for anything that might offer a clue, something that could explain this nightmare. But the road ahead was no better. It was still the same, endless, stretching on, swallowed by the snow, the white blur closing in. The headlights didn't seem to penetrate it anymore. The storm, the road, the figure, everything was wrong. The world felt like it was collapsing in on itself, folding in layers, like she was caught in an endless loop. She couldn't escape. There was nowhere to go. The figure outside the car was gone for now, but its presence lingered. Anna could still feel its eyes on her, could still feel the weight of its intent as it stalked her every move. She had seen it so clearly, so up close, that its image was burned into her mind. Its black, empty eyes. The way its smile stretched impossibly wide. You can't outrun it. She shook her head, trying to shake off the feeling of impending doom. She couldn't think straight, her mind racing. Desperate for answers, but there were none. She couldn't escape. She couldn't stop. The car shuddered again, and she jerked her gaze back to the windshield, her heart skipping a beat. The snow was swirling faster now, almost like it was being drawn into a vortex ahead of her. The road had started to twist and warp, the endless straightaway now curling and bending in strange, unnatural ways. The world outside the car had become a labyrinth of white, each corner leading deeper into nothingness. Drive. The voice inside the car, Kara's voice, whispered again, keep driving, and it will all stop. It will stop if you keep driving. Anna's breath came in short, jagged gasps. She didn't know if she should believe it. She didn't know if anything in this storm could be trusted. But there was only one choice left. She had to keep moving. The thought of stopping, of being still, terrified her. The storm, the figure, her sister's twisted form, it was all too much. The road didn't lead anywhere. But at least it wasn't leading her to certain death. Without thinking, she slammed the pedal to the floor, the car jerking forward with a sudden burst of speed. The road stretched ahead of her, the endless blur of white closing in like a wall. She could barely see anything now, just the flashes of the headlights and the swirling snow. And yet, the voice continued to echo inside her head, louder and louder. Drive, Anna, drive. It was wrong, she realized too late. This wasn't the way out. There was no way out. The storm had already taken her. The road was part of it now, part of the thing that was keeping her trapped in this nightmarish world. The snow began to thicken again, swirling faster than before. The wind howled like a beast, rattling the car, pushing against her as if trying to force her into submission. The headlights flickered. She could hear something, an odd noise, growing louder and louder. It was a scraping sound, like something was dragging across the road behind her. Anna turned to look, her stomach dropping. There was nothing visible behind her, just the swirling snow, but the noise continued. It was coming from the ground, underneath the car, as though something was trying to claw its way up from the earth itself. Her heart raced, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't risk stopping. The storm outside felt alive now, pulsing with a malevolent force. The car was no longer just driving on a road. It was moving through the void, through something far darker than the storm. She could feel the road underneath the tires, but it felt like it was shifting, changing beneath her, as if it wasn't real anymore. And then, without warning, the road cracked. The sound was like the breaking of glass, sharp and terrifying. The car lurched violently, throwing Anna forward against the seatbelt, her body crashing against the restraints. The steering wheel jerked out of her hands, and the car began to spin. She screamed, trying desperately to regain control, but it was no use. The world outside was spinning with her. the snow twisting and curling in impossible ways. The car continued to spin, faster and faster, until Anna could no longer make sense of anything. The road was gone. The car was no longer moving on solid ground. It was floating. No, sinking into the abyss. Then the world went completely dark. Silence. The car came to a stop. Anna's breath came in quick, shallow gasps, her heart still pounding in her chest. She blinked, disoriented, trying to make sense of her surroundings. The storm was gone. The snow, the wind, the world outside had become eerily still. The headlights of the car illuminated a strange, empty landscape, a place that felt both familiar and utterly alien. She was no longer on the road. The car sat on an unfamiliar surface, smooth, dark, almost like glass. She reached out to touch the window, but her hand hesitated. Outside the car, the world stretched into nothingness. A vast, black expanse, with no horizon, no landmarks, no sign of life. The darkness seemed to reach out toward her, an endless void that pressed in on every side. She couldn't see where the road had gone. There was no road. A whisper, soft, like a breath, made her freeze. "You're here?" Kara's voice echoed from beside her. Anna turned slowly. The face in the passenger seat was no longer her sister's. It was the figure, the one from the storm. Its hollow eyes stared at her, the smile still stretched impossibly wide. "You'll never leave," it whispered. Anna's breath caught in her throat. The darkness outside the car began to press in on her, the void stretching and pulling, swallowing everything. There was nowhere left to run. She was trapped. And the storm. It had only just begun. The car sat motionless in the vast, empty void. The cold had settled in completely now, creeping into Anna's bones. She could feel the chill as if it were a part of her, an insidious presence that had wrapped itself around her, its icy fingers squeezing tighter with every passing second. The darkness outside the car pressed in on all sides, as though the universe itself had folded in around her. There was no sign of life. No stars, no clouds, no horizon. Just blackness. The storm had disappeared entirely, and the world outside had become a disorienting, suffocating void. The figure in the passenger seat still stared at her, its face twisted in that same wide, grotesque grin. Its eyes were empty black pits that seemed to pull at her soul, dragging her down into that endless abyss. Anna couldn't breathe. Her body was frozen, paralyzed in the face of this horrifying presence. She knew she needed to move, needed to escape, but her mind wouldn't respond. Her limbs were heavy, as if they had been drained of life, and all she could do was stare back at the figure. "You'll never leave." The figure whispered again, its voice low and hollow, filling the space around her. "The storm has taken you." The words hung in the air, like a death sentence that had already been sealed. She was trapped in this world, in this void, and there was no escape. But then, a thought flickered in the back of her mind. Something small, a fleeting hope. What if it wasn't real? What if she could still wake up from this nightmare? Anna's breath came in shallow gasps as she desperately clung to that thought. "Wake up," she thought, over and over. "Wake up." She closed her eyes tightly, squeezing them shut as if she could block out the figure, block out the cold, block out the suffocating darkness. But the image of the figure was burned into her mind. The twisted grin, the black eyes. The knowledge that it was always there, waiting for her, stalking her in the shadows. She opened her eyes again, unwilling to give in to the fear, unwilling to let it take control. But nothing had changed. The car was still parked in the middle of the vast void, surrounded by nothing but blackness. The figure was still sitting beside her, its eyes unblinking, its grin never wavering. She reached for the door handle, her fingers trembling. She had to get out, had to do something. But as her hand closed around the cold metal, the air around her thickened. A low hum began to reverberate in her chest, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was an unnatural sound. a hum that vibrated in her bones, shaking her to the core. The figure didn't move. It didn't need to. It was watching her, always watching. And as she began to open the door, a sudden burst of cold air blasted into the car, freezing her in place. She could feel the air outside, the void, pushing against her, forcing her back into the seat. The darkness outside swirled, and something moved within it. Something alive. She slammed the door shut with a gasp, her pulse racing as she tried to process what was happening. But it was already too late. The darkness had already begun to claw its way into the car. It was inside now, suffocating her, filling her lungs, and she couldn't breathe. "You can't leave," the figure whispered, its voice growing louder, more insistent. "You're part of it now. You belong here." The words hit her like a slap, the weight of them crushing her chest, suffocating her. She pressed her hands against her ears, trying to block out the voice, but it was no use. It was everywhere, inside her mind, inside her soul. She couldn't escape it. And then the car began to move. At first, it was a small shift, a slight tremor beneath her feet. But then it grew, the car beginning to roll forward, creeping slowly through the endless black void. She could feel the wheels turning, the tires skimming across something, though there was nothing beneath them. There was nothing to drive on. The hum continued, growing louder, more deafening. The figure didn't move, but its eyes locked onto hers, and the grin stretched impossibly wide. It was closer now. Much closer. She gritted her teeth, trying to make sense of what was happening. The car was moving on its own, but where? How? There was nothing. No road, no landmarks. Nothing but the endless blackness. And then she saw it. A flicker in the distance. A pale, flickering light. She couldn't make it out clearly, but it was there. It was distant, but it was there, a pale blue glow. The shimmering like a star in the void. The figure beside her didn't react. It didn't speak. It simply stared. Anna didn't know why, but the light pulled at her. She had to get closer to it. Maybe, just maybe, it was the key to escaping. It had to be. Without thinking, she grabbed the wheel, her hands slick with cold sweat. She wrenched it hard to the left, desperate to head toward the light, to reach it before it disappeared. The car moved faster now, but there was no sound, no screech of tires, no roar of the engine. Just the soft hum that surrounded her, growing louder with each passing second. The darkness around her seemed to grow more oppressive the closer she got to the light. It was like the darkness itself was fighting her, pulling her back. But she refused to stop. She couldn't stop. Not now. Not when there was a chance, however small, that she might find a way out. She could see the light more clearly now. It wasn't just a light. It was a doorway, a shimmering portal suspended in the middle of the void. It glowed with a strange, otherworldly energy, pulsing in time with her racing heart. She reached for the door handle again, her fingers aching from the effort to hold on to the wheel. She was almost there, and then the hum reached a crescendo. The sound became deafening, filling the car, filling her skull, until she thought she would explode from the sheer noise of it. And then the world shifted. The car lurched violently, throwing Anna forward. Her vision blurred, the light ahead of her flickering, shifting. She slammed her foot onto the brake, but it was no use. The world was spinning around her, and the light was no longer in front of her. It had vanished, swallowed by the darkness. The car kept moving, faster now, as if something, no, someone, was pushing it forward. "You can't escape." The voice whispered again, louder now, mocking. "You will never leave." Anna screamed, her voice swallowed by the darkness. She fought to regain control of the car, but it was no use. The road, the storm, the figure, they were all a part of it now. And she couldn't run anymore. The light was gone, and the storm, it was only beginning. The car was no longer moving forward. It was suspended in time. Anna's breath was shallow, her chest tight with panic. The car was still, the black void outside the windows stretching endlessly. The hum had stopped, and for a moment, everything was eerily quiet, as though the storm had finally faded into nothingness. But she knew better. The calm was temporary, the silence before the storm. She sat there in the driver's seat, trembling, unable to move. The figure was still beside her, staring with those empty, black eyes. Its grin stretched impossibly wide, a grotesque parody of a smile that made her skin crawl. It was the same figure from the storm, from the snow, from every twisted nightmare she had faced since this journey began. "You're part of it now," it whispered, its voice like ice cutting through her thoughts. "You belong here." The words hit her like a physical blow. She wasn't sure what it meant. Part of it, part of the storm, part of the darkness, or was it referring to herself? The horror she had felt earlier, the cold, the fear, the impossibility of escape, had only grown deeper. She felt it sinking into her very bones, spreading out through her veins like poison. "You'll never leave," the figure added, the grin spreading even wider, its face contorting as if it were stretching into something darker, something more terrifying. Her hands gripped the steering wheel harder, her knuckles white from the pressure. She could feel the cold seeping into her fingertips, numbing her as the figure continued to whisper things she couldn't comprehend, things that made her want to scream, but she couldn't, because she couldn't let it know how afraid she was, how utterly trapped she felt. The car, the road, the storm, they were all part of something she couldn't escape, a nightmare that had no end, no beginning. Suddenly, the car lurched forward. Anna's heart skipped a beat as the wheels skidded on something slick, something that felt like ice. Her head whipped toward the windshield, her eyes wide in disbelief. The black void was gone. Instead, there was snow, thick, swirling snow, and the road, once again, stretched out before her. But it wasn't the same road. The road was different. It was alive. It twisted and turned unnaturally, its edges curling like the body of a snake. The world around her blurred into a white haze as the snow came down harder, the wind howling against the car, shaking it with each gust. The storm had returned, more furious than ever. Anna couldn't think. She couldn't move. All she could do was watch as the road seemed to shift beneath her, pulling her forward into the storm. She gripped the wheel tighter, her fingers growing numb. There was no choice now. No stopping. She had to keep moving. She had to get out of here. But the car wasn't responding like it should. The wheel felt wrong. The car was struggling to stay on the road, veering this way and that. She looked at the dashboard. The needle on the fuel gauge was flickering, jumping erratically. The engine sputtered as if it had no strength left. Her pulse raced. What was happening? Why wasn't the car working? The road was closing in around her, bending at impossible angles, twisting like some living creature. She could feel the pressure building, pressing down on her, and with it came the overwhelming sense of something closing in, the darkness. The figure, it was back. The wind howled again, the wipers struggling against the ice as they tried to clear the snow from the windshield. But it was futile. The snow came down in thick, blinding sheets, and the road ahead was vanishing. And then, through the blinding snow, she saw it. A light, a flickering light. At first, it was small, just a glimmer in the distance, but it grew brighter, larger, until it filled the space ahead of her. It was a street lamp, a single, flickering light in the middle of nowhere. It made no sense. This was the middle of nowhere, an endless stretch of road surrounded by nothing but snow and darkness. There should be no street lamp here, no light. But there it was, stubbornly flickering in the storm, casting long, twisted shadows across the road. Anna's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know what it meant, but she couldn't look away. She had to get closer. She had to see what it was. Maybe it was a sign of salvation, a way out. But the closer she got, the more wrong it felt. The shadows beneath the lamp weren't right. They shifted unnaturally, moving in ways that no shadow should. The snow around the light was too thick, too still. It didn't move like snow shilled. It wasn't falling or drifting. It was simply there, frozen in place, like the world was held in suspension. Anna slammed her foot on the brake, her pulse racing as the car skidded to a halt in front of the street lamp. The engine sputtered, but she didn't care. She was here. She was finally at the light. She turned to look at it. The light was dimmer than she had expected, casting strange, wavering shadows that didn't match the position of the lamp. The snow around it now was still, as if it had stopped moving altogether. She could feel the car's weight shifting on the icy ground, but the rest of the world seemed frozen in time. And then she saw something else. A figure was standing beneath the light. A tall, thin figure, just like the one she had seen in the storm, in the passenger seat, in her mind. It wasn't the same as the other, the grin, the eyes, but it was the same in every other way. Dark twisted, a shadow of something she couldn't comprehend. Its face was hidden in the dark, but she could feel its eyes on her. It was watching her, just like the other one, just like the thing. Anna's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't look away. She was frozen, paralyzed by the figure standing there in the darkness. The grin stretched wider, impossibly wide. Its mouth opened, the shadow of its face distorting as it spoke. "You're here now," it whispered, its voice low and guttural, full of malice. "You can't leave. You'll never leave." Anna's hands flew to the door handle. Her heart hammered in her chest. No, not again, not like this. But as her hand touched the door, the figure moved. It wasn't walking. It was gliding, floating toward her, the shadows following its every movement like a cloak. Anna tried to pull the door open, but it was locked. She fumbled with the handle, her breath shallow, her fingers numb from the cold. The figure was coming closer now, moving faster. She had to get out. She had to get away. The figure reached the car, and as its hand pressed against the window, everything in the car went black. The engine sputtered and died, and in the silence, the whisper echoed in her mind. "You'll never leave." The storm had returned, and this time, it would take her. The blackness enveloped her, and for a moment, Anna thought she had been swallowed whole by the storm, lost in the void. The car was no longer moving. The cold was unbearable. The darkness wasn't just outside anymore. It was inside her, crawling under her skin, pressing down on her chest with a suffocating weight. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably, still gripping the wheel, her fingers icy and stiff. She could feel the cold seeping into her bones. The hum of the engine was gone. The headlights had gone out. The figure outside, the one standing under the street lamp, was gone too. But in its place, there was something else. A presence. A feeling of being watched. She opened her eyes, but the blackness was still there, heavy and unyielding. The car seemed to be suspended in time, the air thick with the smell of dust and decay. The figure, its smile, its eyes, had vanished, but it hadn't left. No, it was still there, deep within her mind, crawling like a parasite, feeding off her fear. A whisper broke the silence. "You'll never leave." Anna gasped, her breath catching in her throat as the words slithered through the blackness. The voice was cold, like a breeze from the grave. She turned her head, trying to locate the source, but there was nothing. Just the same empty, suffocating darkness. Her heart hammered in her chest, each beat growing louder and louder until it was all she could hear. "You've crossed the line." The voice whispered again. This time, it was clearer, more insistent. "You've entered the storm. The storm never lets go, and you can never leave." Anna slammed her hands over her ears, trying to block out the voice. But it wouldn't stop. It was everywhere. Inside her head, inside her very soul. It was as if the voice was coming from the very air around her, vibrating in the walls of the car, curling into her thoughts. The words were relentless. The road is gone. The storm will consume you. It's too late to escape. You are already part of it. She pulled at the door handle again, but the door wouldn't open. The car was locked in place, frozen, as if the storm itself had sealed her inside. There was nowhere to go, no way out. The darkness was closing in, pressing against her like the walls of a tomb. She felt the air grow colder, so cold it hurt. The temperature dropped so suddenly that her breath became visible, swirling in front of her face like smoke. The cold wrapped around her, suffocating her, but she refused to give in. She wouldn't let it take her. She couldn't let it take her. She was not going to die here. With every ounce of strength left in her, Anna threw herself against the door, her fists pounding against the glass, her voice hoarse as she screamed. "No,
I won't stay here.
I won't." The voice laughed, cold and cruel. The sound echoed in the darkness, reverberating in her bones. "It's too late." Anna recoiled, her heart thudding in her chest. The laughter faded, but the sense of impending doom remained. The storm was growing stronger outside. She could feel the wind howling again, shaking the car, rattling the windows. It wasn't just a storm anymore. It was a force, a presence, a malevolent entity, alive and hungry, and it had her trapped. The car shook again, and this time, Anna's head whipped toward the windshield. Through the glass, she could see the storm, not just around her, but inside the car. The snow had returned, swirling in thick, swirling gusts, as if the storm was manifesting within the confines of the car. The cold air flooded in, and the frost began to form along the edges of the windows. The temperature plummeted even further, and Anna's breath came in rapid, visible clouds. The frost crawled up the windows, curling in intricate patterns, thickening the glass until it was nearly impossible to see anything outside. It felt like she was being entombed in ice. She reached out again, her hand trembling, and touched the icy window. A chill shot through her fingertips, but she didn't pull away. The cold wasn't just from the outside. It was inside her, in her heart, in her soul. And then the figure appeared again. It was standing outside the car, just beyond the frosted window. Its twisted form still, but this time it wasn't alone. The darkness around it was shifting, growing, stretching like tendrils of shadow. The figure didn't smile. It didn't move. But it was there, watching her. And this time, Anna saw something else. Behind the figure, in the swirling mass of snow and darkness, there were more shapes. Figures, shadows, flickering in and out of view, appearing and disappearing like phantoms, each one twisted and grotesque in its own way. Anna's breath caught in her throat as she watched. These weren't just people. These weren't just figments of her imagination. They were real. The figures outside the car moved with unnatural grace, their faces hidden. But their eyes, she could feel their eyes, watching her, staring, waiting. She was surrounded. The figures outside the car pressed closer, their forms becoming clearer in the fog. Their faces, distorted and contorted, leered at her, their grins wide and impossible. Their eyes were black, like endless pits, swallowing all light and warmth. The figure closest to her, the one she recognized, raised a hand, and she saw it clearly now. Its fingers were long, unnaturally long, and tipped with jagged, sharp claws that scraped against the window with a sound that made her stomach turn. They were trying to get in. Anna scrambled back, her heart hammering in her chest. She grabbed the wheel, the door handle, anything she could reach, but nothing would work. She slammed her fists against the window, but the frost only thickened, the glass freezing under her touch. "You can't outrun it," the voice whispered again, the figure outside now pressing against the window, its face grinning wider, impossibly wide. The glass cracked with a loud snap, and Anna's scream died in her throat. The storm outside was inside now, and the figures were too close. The window shattered completely, sending ice shards flying. The cold ripped through the car, and Anna felt a sharp, stabbing pain in her chest. The storm, the figures, they were pulling her in, taking her, and she couldn't stop it. The laughter grew louder, colder, until it drowned out everything else. The storm had won. She had lost. Anna's body jerked violently as the freezing air poured into the car, the ice, sharp wind biting into her skin, chilling her to the core. She tried to scream, to make some sound. Anything. But the only thing she could hear was the laughter. It was cold, mocking, cruel. It echoed around her, swirling through the storm, filling the space inside the car, twisting her thoughts, choking her. Her hands were numb, her fingers useless, frozen to the bone. She reached for the door handle once again, but the car was no longer responding. It wasn't just the cold. It wasn't just the storm. She was no longer in control of anything. The storm, the dark, wrething storm, had taken over the world outside the car, and now it was inside. The figures outside the car pressed closer, their faces distorted, their mouths twisted into grotesque, unnatural shapes. Some of them had no faces at all, just empty, black voids where eyes should have been. Their hands reached toward her, clawing, scratching against the cracked window with a sound that made her teeth rattle. She could feel their presence, crawling through the very air, as if the storm had brought their souls to life. The frost on the window spread faster now, crawling across the glass, thickening until she couldn't see anything outside. The laughter, the voices, the cold, all of it intensified, flooding her senses until her mind seemed to crack under the pressure. The figure, the one with the impossible grin, was standing right in front of her now, pressing its face against the shattered window. Its eyes were black, empty, soulless. The smile stretched wider, grotesque, as though its very form was struggling to contain the malice inside it. "You're already here," it whispered. Its voice was like sandpaper, grating against her ears, scraping away any last remnants of resistance. "This is where you belong." Anna recoiled in terror, her body trembling violently, but there was no escape. She couldn't move. The world outside had become a swirling, suffocating void, and the storm, the figures, had become a part of her. The shadows, the darkness, the storm had taken her. It had always been waiting for her, lurking just beneath the surface of the road, beneath the snow, beneath her very soul. A sudden, sharp pain shot through her chest. She gasped, her heart thumping in her throat. The storm, the figures. It wasn't just outside her anymore. It was inside her. She could feel it. The cold was in her bones. The darkness had crept into her skin, her flesh. The laughter grew louder, but it was different now. It wasn't just the storm, it was her. The laughter came from her. It came from inside her. The figure outside the car moved, its hand reaching through the broken window, its long, twisted fingers brushing against her cheek. The touch was cold, too cold, and the pain intensified as if the very essence of the storm was crawling into her veins. The black eyes of the figure bored into hers, and she felt herself slipping, as though her body was being drained, the storm pulling the warmth, the life, out of her. She tried to speak, to scream, but the words wouldn't come. The storm had stolen her voice. She was trapped in this nightmare, unable to escape, unable to break free. "You're part of it now," the figure whispered again, its breath cold against her skin. The grin stretched wider still. "You'll never leave." The figure's claws dug into the broken window frame, pulling itself closer. Its grotesque face pressed against the glass, its eyes never leaving hers. It was inside her now. It was all around her. The storm, the darkness, the figures, they were her now. They had claimed her. The world outside the car had become a swirling mass of blackness, with no horizon, no sky, no road. The light from the shattered street lamp outside had dimmed to nothingness. The storm had swallowed it whole. And then, just as suddenly as the world had plunged into madness, everything stopped. The wind ceased. The figures outside the car vanished. The laughter disappeared. The suffocating cold. It faded, leaving behind an oppressive silence. For a brief moment, Anna felt like she had been pulled out of the storm, as though the nightmare had ended. She opened her eyes. She wasn't sure how long she had kept them shut, and looked around. The car was still there. The road was still there. The world outside seemed normal, as though nothing had ever happened. The snow had stopped falling. The sky was a dull, gray expanse, and the road stretched out in front of her, clear and unobstructed. For a fleeting moment, Anna thought she had escaped. That the storm, the figures, the nightmare, it was all gone. But then she heard it, the laughter. It started softly, barely a whisper, but it grew louder, echoing through the silence. Anna's heart froze in her chest as the laughter turned into something else. Something worse. It wasn't just a sound. It was a presence. It was the storm. It was them. The figures, the darkness. They were still there, waiting for her. Her fingers gripped the wheel harder, her hands slick with sweat as she tried to start the car. She had to get out. She had to drive. The storm was closing in again. She could feel it. The figures, they weren't gone. They had never been gone. The storm wasn't just outside her. It was inside her now. The road stretched out in front of her, but the end was nowhere in sight. There was no escape. The storm had taken her. It had always been waiting for her. And now, there was no turning back. The engine sputtered to life with a soft cough, but the storm was already closing in again. The figures, their faces, their black eyes, flashed in and out of her vision, stalking her from the edges of the road, watching her. Anna's foot pressed down on the gas pedal, but it didn't matter. The road would never end, and the storm would never stop.